Ladies and gentlemen, joining us from ESPN, Eagles beat writer extraordinaire, Mr. Tim McManus. Tim, great to see you, brother.
Boys, what's going on?
I had to tell him the story. I got to tell the story real quick.
It's fantastic.
So I texted Tim yesterday. I said, Tim, do you have time to come on with us today? And he graciously said, yeah, D-Gun, let's do 12:30. So I look at my phone this morning just because my phone's blowing up with all kind of stuff this morning. And I look and I see Tim 950 ESPN. So then I go to my text messages and I type in Tim McManus. And under Tim McManus, I have Tim McManus, ESPN 97.5. So now I'm thinking, oh, geez, who's this Tim from 950? I text the wrong Tim because I have the Tim under 950, just Tim, and the other one under his full name. So now I'm thinking, how am I going to get out of this? So I said, I know it's going to happen because usually Tim tells me, D-Gun, I got to get approval. I get that. So I said, Tim McManus, I text him, hey, do you have time to come on with us at 12:30 today? He says, I thought we agreed on 12:30. I'm like, huh? So then I start cross-referencing. And the same number, and I'm like, thank you, Lord. I was thinking, because if this other Tim had texted me, hey, D-Gun, are we still on for 12:30? I was going to act like I didn't get a text. I was like, I don't know who this Tim is. He could be a construction worker by now. I don't know if he's even in the business. So thank goodness. And my wife is always on me. Why don't you go through your phone and clean out your phone numbers? I'm like, oh my goodness. Thank goodness it was one and the same. So
D-Gun, number one, you got to clean that phone up, man. That station hasn't been 950 in like a decade, right? So that's number one. Number two, like, I'm pretty delirious today. That was the longest preseason game of all time last night. So I didn't get to bed until 2 a.m. So I get this text from you this morning. I'm like, I could have sworn we just had this text exchange yesterday. Am I totally losing it?
Oh, no. It was Gunner. It was definitely Gunner who was losing it.
Most definitely. Most definitely. He's being pulled in a million directions.
Tim, it's great to have you on, man. It really is. Thank you for coming on with us. I do want to start with injuries. We know about Zach McPherson. Season's done with the torn Achilles. Looking at the other 5 names that made their way on the injured list at some point last night, how are we doing there? Ajomo being one of them, of course, and Tyree Cleveland.
Yeah, those were the 2 scary ones, guys. You know, anytime the cart comes out and all the players take a knee and they're getting wheeled off on a stretcher, I mean, that's, you know, everybody has a lump in their throat. And so they came out with the news last night that both of those players have movement in all of their extremities. So that's obviously good news, but we haven't gotten further word on their condition today yet. So we obviously have them in our thoughts and hope the best there. As you said, McPherson done with the Achilles, D-Gun, the first one on that it was an Achilles that they were looking at last night. And that's really unfortunate because, you know, he was a core special teams player for this team. And not only that, but like he's one of the next guys up should anything happen to whether it's Avonte Maddox or Darius Slay or Bradbury. And so that's a bit of a blow to the Eagles, who already lost the core special teamer and Sean Bradley pretty recently here. Nolan Smith, he went out with that shoulder. He said that he was fine afterwards, but there was kind of interesting language from him where he said that his shoulder is his baby and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I'm like, what does that mean? So we need to dig in a little bit more on that. Is this going to be like a season-long thing? Is there something more going on with that shoulder? Something we definitely have to explore. But generally speaking, it seemed good news on the Nolan Smith front. That's obviously good for the Eagles because he's going to be a pretty critical part, I think, of this defense, certainly moving forward. And, and then Zacchaeus also with the shoulder, and we're going to be monitoring that one.
Hey Tim, we got to go to the elephant in the room. What are we going to do about Marcus Mariota? I mean, dude, I thought it would get at least a little better from game 1 to game 2. To me, it got worse. I mean, what are we going to do with this guy?
I don't think that Mariota would disagree that it got worse, or Sirianni. You know, I mean, afterwards, Mariota described his play as sloppy. It's a pretty good description for what we saw last night against the Browns. And Sirianni kind of pushed back on the idea that the first preseason game was rough for him, but acknowledged that this one wasn't great. And it reflects a lot of what we've seen during training camp, where Mariota has been either quick to take off or inaccurate with his throws and maybe holding on to the ball too long. I mean, some of it is understandable when you're talking about a guy who's, I think he said this is his 8th system in 9 years. And, you know, he's still learning things. And so I get that, but you want to have some level of reassurance as you're getting closer to the regular season that if Jalen Hurts goes down, and we know with his playing style that he might go down, that the person who comes in is going to be able to capably hold it down during the time that Hurts is out. And so far, you know, Mariota obviously has not calmed those kind of nerves here in Philadelphia.
Hey, Tim, thanks again for coming on to the show. We really appreciate you. You know, this Eagles defense, this team in general, but most notably the defense, they're relying heavily on a lot of young guys to really come in and really make an impact, and not just make an impact, but make it quickly and rather effectively. You know, what's your overall outlook on this Eagles defense that has lost some key components from last year up until this season?
Yeah, so I think that it's the big question mark about this team, and it still looks shaky to me, and especially right up the middle. I mean, that's where the Eagles decided not to invest, was at the linebacker and the safety spots. And while I think that's overall, like, that's the right way to build a roster, you invest in the defensive front and your cornerbacks, and then you fill in the rest. But they have taken that to kind of an extreme version here, Tone. So they're going to, like you said, be relying on a guy like Nakobe Dean, who I think, you know, fortunately for them, flashed in that preseason game last night. Him cutting into the backfield, creating the fumble near the goal line. Like, that's the kind of thing that they wanted to see. And you could tell, like, Sirianni kind of pumped up when that play happened, that he was glad to see it. And he said, Dean's our guy. I mean, you know, so clearly that's one of the guys in the middle they're going to be relying on, but he's unproven at this level. Very good at Georgia, clearly leader of, you know, an historic defense and on the collegiate level, but he still has to prove it here. And then safety, it's the same way. Like, Reed Blankenship has solidified one of those safety spots, but it's very much up in the air who that next guy is going to be. Some think it might be Kayvon Wallace, but Kayvon Wallace played all the way to the end of the fourth quarter last night. Terrell Edmonds maybe has the most pedigree out of that group, but hasn't really shown a whole lot so far this summer. And then everybody's favorite, Sidney Brown, kind of coming up the side rail, right? Like, everybody's hoping that he comes, and he said, I want to be a feared player. And you know, he emulates B-Doc, and he emulates Troy Polamalu, and everybody loves to hear that. And it seems like he's got a ton of promise, but also has to, you know, prove that he can be a consistent force on that defense. And so there's still a whole lot up in the air with not a whole lot of time remaining.
Tim, I got to be honest with you, man. You're the first person I thought of when I woke up this morning. I'm not even kidding. You live.
Where did this be going?
Yeah, no, that's the end of it. Gunnar, you have a question? No.
That was it. Yeah,
that was it. Yeah, I just wanted to make the statement.
As far as he knows how to make it weird, right? He knows how to make it a little awkward.
It's called an attention getter. No. So last night, John McMullen was on the post-game show with Gunnar and I, and he invoked your name, Tim McManus. He said that you talked about Sidney Brown, and perhaps you know where I'm going with this. He said that the thing that might hurt Sidney Brown in this defense is that Sean Desai and Nick Sirianni, what Nick Sirianni wants in his defense is don't give up the big play. The way Sidney Brown plays, he could give up the big play. Here I am all excited about being aggressive. Here I am all excited about him playing fast and furious. And it could be something that doesn't work to his favor in this scheme or philosophy. First off, can you confirm that you said those words? And second, is that true?
Yeah, so Johnny Mack and I were having that conversation as we were watching practice a handful of days ago, and he told me he was going to steal that. But
he did credit you.
He did give me credit, so that part I wasn't expecting. You know, that was very nice of Johnny Mack to drop my name there. And yeah, that was the thought that I had, because it's kind of like this conflicting thing. The Eagles organizationally have this defensive philosophy, and I think that they're only going to hire defensive coordinators that are on board with it. Is where we want to keep the big play off of us. We believe fundamentally that is one of the keys to winning football games. And Jonathan Gannon, as we know, was really big on that, to the point that, you know, people in Philly were pulling their hair out, you know, get more aggressive. And it didn't really ever happen. And Sean Desai, echoed the fact that he's a big believer also in keeping the big play off you, which in general is a good thing, but it comes at a cost. And that is not always being able to be as aggressive as you want to be. So how does Sidney Brown fit into that? Because he's somebody that wants to play not reckless, but certainly with a level of enthusiasm and instinct that's going to lend to kind of shooting his shot, steaming downhill. Relying on his instincts to cover a lot of ground and get a jump on things. Sometimes that's going to be amazing. And especially early on in his career, sometimes I think that's going to lead to balls going over the top of him, missing a tackle, those kind of things. And he's going to have to sort of harness, all of that he has pent up inside of him. And I think he's got a ton of potential. But yeah, like how does that fit into the structure of what Sean Desai is building is a question that I can't get a grasp on because those things seem to be conflicting, right?
You know what, Tim? Sidney has emerged real quick as a camp favorite, and we did a little survey the other day of camp darlings that fell by the wayside in past Eagles camps. When you look at Sidney, and you're right, and I've said this before, Terrell Edmonds has been silent all training camp and through 2 preseason games. Would you be shocked if it's announced in a few weeks if Sean Desai, Matt Patricia can rein in some of that explosiveness of Sidney Brown if it was announced that Sidney Brown will be starting with Reed Blankenship?
I guess I would be surprised if it started that way.
Okay.
I feel like he's going to have like a support role at the beginning, but it's inevitable that he's going to get more playing time as the season goes on, because it's just hard not to watch what he does, even in a preseason setting or a training camp setting, and just see what that could look like for you and the way that it could help benefit your defense. Like just the ferocity that he plays with, that those big hits are coming, that turnovers are coming, that he can cover the field unlike really anybody else, in that unit. And if you were to just kind of like give somebody a description of what a safety should look like, and then line up all the different safeties that the Eagles have, like you would immediately point to Sidney Brown. He looks the part. And I know that the Eagles feel really good about his prospects. When they got him, they talk about him, almost as highly as they talk about somebody like Jalen Carter. Like they were psyched that they got Sidney Brown. So it's a matter of time, D-Gun. I don't know if I don't know about week 1, but eventually I think he takes over one of those safety spots.
Tim, staying on the defensive side of the ball, you brought up Jalen Carter, right? Howie Roseman, he drafted Jalen Carter top 10 2023 NFL draft. 2022 NFL draft, he drafts Jordan Davis in the top 15. That's 2 high-value picks that Howie Roseman has so far dedicated to not just the D-line, but specifically the defensive tackle position. There's a chance this may be Fletcher Cox's last year, right? So knowing what we know about this defensive line as it stands right now, knowing what we know about Fletcher Cox's career trajectory and where that may go, and knowing what we know about Jordan Davis's rookie season and Jalen Carter coming in as a rookie, how much pressure is on Howie Roseman to make sure the future of this defensive line remains on the right side of things? Because, again, he's putting a lot of faith in 2 young guys, and in 2 back-to-back drafts, he spent it on 2 defensive tackles. He's showing you very clearly these guys are the future. So what's your overall evaluation and outlook on this defensive line as it pertains to the defensive tackle position, and how much pressure is on Howie Roseman for these 2 guys to actually live up to the bill?
No, I think it's a really important question because everybody is banking, including Philly, on that defensive front being, what drives the engine defensively. And so that needs to be right. And the guys that you're investing heavily in early in the draft, and Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, they need to mature quickly and contribute immediately. So what we've seen during camp is that Jordan Davis has been working almost exclusively with the first team alongside Fletcher Cox. And Cox, after a recent practice, called Davis a 3-down defensive lineman now. So they feel like he's going to have a big role and he's going to contribute. And then we see these big flashes from Jalen Carter. Everybody saw the first snap that he had against the Ravens where he just knifes into the backfield drops Josh Johnson. It's like, well, that was easy. Like, you made it look so easy that he thought something was wrong, like a screen was coming or something. That's how cleanly he beats the guard. And then he goes into the joint practice settings up against all-pro guard Joel Bitonio and pancakes the dude, puts him on his back. It's like, that's not supposed to happen. Like, for a rookie defensive tackle, that's a position that usually takes some time for these guys to develop. So there's, you know, there's definitely like these bright flashes of potential, particularly from Carter. But you also have to remember that they're trying to replace the production of Javon Hargrave. And he had 11 sacks for this team last year. And to your point, Fletcher Cox, you know, is getting older. You know, so it really puts, you know, an emphasis on these young players and those draft picks. And yeah, Howie's got to be right, because that's where he's investing, I think rightfully so. And these guys have to prove him right.
Real quick, Tim. So you see from the defensive side of things, though, with the linebackers, I think you said earlier, Nakobe Dean, his job to lose as a starting middle linebacker.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, outside of that, Christian Ellis is having a strong camp. Christian Ellis is having a strong preseason. Obviously, Zach Cunningham is here now. He's one of the leaders in tackles last night, had a tackle for loss. How do you think it shakes out around Nakobe Dean when it comes to these linebackers?
I thought it was really interesting that they decided to have the starting pair of linebackers last night as Nakobe Dean and Zach Cunningham, right? So Cunningham comes in, and I think he was like the less of the touted between he and Miles Jack when they each signed their one-year deal on the same days. And Jack comes in and he has first team reps on the very first day of practice that he's in there. And it's like, okay, maybe he's gonna carve himself out a role. But I feel like his playing time has gone backwards a little bit, while Cunningham's has really accelerated. And what we've seen in practice is Cunningham making a lot of plays, including like tip balls on passes over the middle by Deshaun Watson during those joint practices, a couple of them leading to Reed Blankenship interceptions. And Sirianni talked about that after the game last night, of like when he used to go up against Cunningham when they were both in the AFC South. Like, that was a big thing. Cunningham has, you know, a lot of length to him, and he can be disruptive in the passing game as a result of that, and is showing that he's got pretty good instincts as well. And so I'm starting to get a little bit bullish on Cunningham potentially stealing one of those jobs. I do think that it's going to be Nakobe Dean in the one spot. And right now it's been this competition where it's been a little bit of Morrow and a little bit of Christian Ellis. And now we're starting to see some Cunningham. And it feels like the momentum at the moment is on Cunningham's side.
Are we making too much of the fact that Miles Jack didn't even get in the game until late in the third quarter into the fourth quarter? I understand you want to get a look at a lot of younger players, but, you know, when veterans go in games, there's a certain unwritten respect factor when you insert them in preseason games because of their pedigree. And, you know, when you look at his pedigree and how long he's been in the league, I thought it was a little interesting that he didn't go in the game until that late in the game.
No, I agree with you, Degon. You know, that certainly opened my eyes a little bit here too. I know that he trained in the offseason with Buda Baker, and if you talk to their trainer, you know, he said that Miles Jack cut his body fat from like 20+% down to 12%. Wow. Jack is saying that he feels like he's in the best shape of his life. But I guess we just haven't really seen it show through on the field yet. I mean, it hasn't been a ton of time for him to get acclimated, but, you know, time is also sort of running out here, and they need to make some decisions on who's going to make the 53-man roster. And then, of course, when those cutdowns happen, like, do we add somebody who ends up getting cut from another team? Do we make a trade? These are decisions that are going to be dictated in part about how the guys are showing, the guys that are in-house right now, how they're showing out. We just haven't seen it from Jack yet. I think it is a little bit telling that he was playing so late in that preseason game, and he's got to really start coming on if he wants to secure a job here.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing when you look at what's going on at that position, especially with the veterans that they brought in. What I want to ask you, last thing for me, Tim, is when it comes to the backup quarterback, I am concerned about Marcus Mariota. I'm concerned about what the head coach had to say about him after the game, still trying to learn what he does well. Thought that was odd for a veteran, and then had glowing things to say about Tanner McKee. Is the backup quarterback, is the number 2 quarterback to Jalen Hurts on this roster right now?
I think so. I think so. And I think it's going to be Mariota. Part of, I believe, what we saw last night is that Mariota was trying to operate from the pocket more. He only rushed one time. That's in like sharp contrast to what he's done over his career, what he's done during the preseason so far. I think that he was trying to be more of a pocket passer last night. Clearly, he's still trying to search for like a firm grasp of this offense and execute it at a high level. It just hasn't shown itself yet. And meanwhile, Tanner McKee looks good for a rookie. I mean, he seems like he's got control of this offense, at least whatever they're giving him right now. And the decisions he's making are good ones. The ball is coming out quick, and he's pushing the ball downfield. And we know what it often looks like, guys, for, like a late round quarterback when they jump into the fray at first, Clayton Thorson's of the world or whatever. Like most of the time, it's ugly. And right now, with McKee, it's pretty. And his stat line would have looked a lot better if these guys would be catching the balls for him.
Yeah.
There's like 4 drops last night, 5 drops last night for him. So, they can't help but they have to be looking at that and be like, all right, well, maybe we hit on this quarterback. It probably is a little bit premature to push him in front of Mariota, given that Mariota's got like 8 years of experience on him. But, if it continues to go south for Mariota and continues to go north for McKee, then that's at some point the coaches are going to have to look at that and make a decision.
Hey, Tim, for as much as we were salivating over the play of the young secondary, that first game against Baltimore, man, they had a rough night. You look at Keely Ringo, that one play deep ball by Dorian Thompson Robinson down the sideline. He stops for a minute, loses containment, loses sight of the ball. Ball drops in between 2 defenders, and then Eli Ricks. This Austin Watkins, man, he was having his way with these guys last night. But that's a part of the learning curve for young players. But as good as they played that first night, it was that inconsistent last night.
Yeah, and that's why it's good to have like a lot of exposure as much as you can to these younger players, because you get in one snapshot, one picture, and then in another snapshot, another one. And I think that's, what happened last night with both Ringo and Ricks. Ringo it looks like he had a clear path to an interception on that one pass down the right sideline, and he just stopped or didn't locate the ball. It was kind of a curious play that ended up being a reception that shouldn't have been. And then Ricks, he had a touchdown scored on him. He fell down multiple times while he was in coverage, leading to multiple receptions last night. Much different than when he had the pick 6 and he had all those PBUs in the preseason opener against Baltimore. And now the injury to McPherson shines more of a light on the cornerback depth here in Philadelphia, which has been looked at, throughout training camp, like pretty good. They have a decent group, but now it's going to push like Josh Job's importance up all that more. Just Josiah Scott, who, if you asked me last week if he makes the team, I would say, probably not. Now it's, well, maybe, because he's got experience in the slot corner. And if you think, and that's, McPherson was listed as the number 2 at slot corner. And if you look at it, Avonte Maddox had a lot of injuries last year that kept him out, including a toe injury that required off-season surgery. And so it's no guarantee that he's going to be on the field a lot. So now, like a guy, Mario Goodrich is more in play. Josiah Scott is more in play. There's a opening for someone like Ricks. And they're going to have to make the most of those opportunities.
Yeah, sorry about dropping out, you guys. I had a little bit of a technical difficulty, but I'm back, and I'm going to try to get in where I fit in. Tim, I have a question about this Eagles schedule, right? And as it pertains to Jalen Hurts and where his career may go from here. This schedule is deemed by all that it's the most difficult schedule in the NFL. And, when it comes to Jalen Hurts, he came in second. He came runner up to Patrick Mahomes for that MVP award. And he did miss 2 games on the season that kind of, put a damper on his chances of winning that award. But when you think about this year's schedule and then you compare it to last year's schedule, is Jalen Hurts poised even more than ever to be able to take home that MVP? Obviously, a lot of things have to go well, and he has to perform. But based off the strength of this schedule, based off of the the type of quarterback competition this team is going to have to face. And you're going to see Jalen Hurts face off with a lot of top-tier talent, guys like Josh Allen, Tua Tagovailoa, Patrick Mahomes again, Aaron Rodgers, guys of that nature. He's going to have to play San Fran again. So he has a tall task in front of him. Is he more poised than ever before to be able to take home the MVP award if everything goes well?
Well, I think there's things that are pulling in opposite directions that'll help decide that. One of them is the schedule, as you mentioned. It's just going to be a tougher road. Another one is the fact that there's more tape on Hurts now, and defensive coordinators around the league have spent a portion of their offseason trying to figure out how to slow down Philadelphia and, more specifically, how to slow down Hurts. And so they're going to be throwing different things at them that the Eagles need to have counters for. We need to see whether that happens or not this season. So that's pulling in one direction. Pulling in the other is the fact that, Hurts, as we know, every year in his career has grown. He's got another year in Nick Sirianni's offensive system to get comfortable in, and we saw what happened when he finally was in the same system back-to-back years. Now this is a third year that he's going to be in there. And you almost forget it because of how good the chemistry was right off the shoot between he and his best friend, A.J. Brown. But that was only 1 year together. Now they're in the offensive system for another season. Sirianni's talking about the fact that Brown has gotten faster over the course of this offseason and looks like he's ready to separate more and take his game to another level. And we know what Devontae Smith is looking like in the way that he can accelerate. And so, knowing the way Hurts works and regularly grows, like I think that when they talk about, we don't know what his ceiling yet is, like I buy into that. I think that there's potential for him to take another jump in his game this year. What does that look like versus stiffer competition versus coaches that have maybe him figured out a little bit more? Like that's kind of the battle of this regular season. That's what it's about, is figuring out just how much higher he can elevate versus, in tougher circumstances.
Gotcha. Tim, can't thank you enough for coming on, man. We know it's a very busy schedule when the preseason's underway, but as far as this Eagles coverage goes, no one's doing it better than you, my friend. From ESPN, Tim McManus right there. Tim, thanks so much, brother.
I appreciate it, guys. Always a pleasure. D-Gun, clean up that phone, man.
Yes, I'm working on it right now. Yes.
Thank you, Tim. We appreciate you.
See you guys.
Oh, my goodness.
That is great. All right. We kind of touched on it there with Tim McManus when it came to the quarterback position. So let's get into this in a second. There were two things said last night by your head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, Nick Sirianni. And this morning, I'm still scratching my head. This afternoon, I'm still scratching my head about how he doesn't already know this. So we'll get into that when we come back here on Sports Take.